Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. I'm really enjoying a lot of these recent stories that include bosses who had people's backs. It's so often that the boss in stories like this is the bad guy. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Of course, sir, I'll fax those right away. Roughly 25 years ago, I worked for an independent mortgage house, meaning they weren't attached to a bank to fund loans. Though this company's now defunct, it was one of the largest mortgage lenders in the country at one point. This company made their money by selling the loans which they had funded to a loan servicer who would collect the payments. I worked for one of the offices that prepared a certain special type of loan to be ready to sell to the servicer. The loans I had to prepare were originated at independent branches throughout the country. I never had any responsibility for the condition in which I received those loans. My job was to scan the loan folder for missing documents, so basically I receive a loan from the branch and evaluate what's missing on the back end of the sale. Then I prepare a report for each missing item on that loan. This report's called an LPN for Lost Potential Notice, which means we'll lose the ability to sell that special loan to the servicer if we cannot collect that missing loan document. The lost revenue will count against the branch that originated the loan. It's my job to then send the LPN to the branch so they can forward me the missing documents via our free internal mail server. And now for the malicious compliance. I received a batch of loans made through this special loan program from a branch office in a very cold northern state. The kind of cold that must have frozen the common sense out of this very particular, very important branch manager, VIBM. Apparently, the VIBM did not know that all of the loans in this program required the documentation which proved that the client qualified for this special loan, for short, the QD qualifying document. How that information escaped him during branch manager training school is beyond me. So every loan in this program at VIBM's branch is missing the QD, for which I create the LPNs. All said and done, I had a little over 100 for a 4-month span of VIBM's lending activity. Since I've never had this many LPNs for one branch before, I did two things. I told my boss and her boss, and then called VIBM to do him a solid and let him know what was up. My boss knew this guy was a pain, so she came and listened while I called. Me. Hi VIBM, I have a large number of LPNs for missing QDs. I think someone in your branch might be forgetting to request. VIBM. Do not waste my time. No one ever calls for LPNs. I run a multi-million-dollar branch and I'm too busy to deal with a few routine missing items. Just fax me the LPNs and my staff will deal with it. Me. Sir, there are quite a few. VIBM. Just effing fax them. Click. I look at her and said, I have some faxing to do. She just grinned. So, on a 1996 thermal paper fax machine, I sent him 200 plus pages of LPNs. It burned through 2 rolls of his expensive paper and tied up his line for the better part of 1 to 2 hours. He called my boss, sputtering that I was an incompetent, time-wasting a-hole. My boss always had my back, and she simply asked him why he'd hung up on me when I tried to warn him. She told her boss, the VP of loan sales for the entire company, and she wrote him up for a failure to comply with loan filing requirements, one step before firing if you're a branch manager. It was a beautiful day. And our second story. If you can't handle the truth, I once had the crappiest landlord, LL. Our first warning came when all 3 ladies in the local Consumer Dispute Council flinched badly when they heard his name. Hubby and me were there to get a standard rental contract because LL's homemade version looked somewhat dodgy when it came to how the deposit should be handled. The ladies all agreed that we had a legal right to use the standard contract and strongly insisted we should avoid signing any other version. They aren't allowed to say anything about other people's disputes there, but there were a lot of meaningful looks getting thrown around. Both hubby and I noticed and agreed that we had to be cautious onwards. We moved in anyway. We were both going to uni and needed roof over our heads. Still, we immediately started looking into other options, which turned out to be a wise move. During the 6 months we rented there, he abused our friend verbally and horribly because he'd parked his old car in a public parking spot not too far from the house. The car was old and cheap, but clean and otherwise perfectly normal. He asked us repeatedly to move our trash cans to new sides of the house, which we did. It wasn't hard, but it was annoying that he couldn't decide where he wanted them. He tried to sell our sports equipment, skis and bikes, which he'd offered to store in his shed when we first negotiated terms. I could go on and on. There was something every single day, hundreds of off-putting and petty issues that obviously meant the world to him, as he always yelled his orders, looking like imminent heart attack personified. Hubby and I agreed to LL's many whims. We just wanted to make as little fuss as possible and get the hell out of Dodge. The single dad to 2 toddlers renting the apartment next to us moved in after us and out before us. I didn't know exactly what transpired, but Mr. LL wasn't any kinder to kids. Happily, our best other housing option finally came through, and we were, of course, super relieved. But before we managed to give our notice, we got the single moment that made up for 6 months of treading on eggshells. It was late autumn, and the first snow had started falling as we drove home one evening. The next morning, as we were still putting the kettle on, violent knocking was heard at the door. Outside stood LL, absolutely livid and yelling that we either had to brush away the snow before parking or park at the public parking spot, because he now had visible tracks in his driveway. He was right, too. You could see the melted tracks there. But as we had a new and fantastic housing contract signed and in our pocket, we for once didn't give a single damn. So? LL, you can't drive on this snow. I was just looking at him as his face rapidly went through every color in the red spectrum, which was both worrying and somewhat disturbing. While I pondered his survival chances, he made his near-fatal mistake as he yelled at the top of his lungs, LL, do you think I'm stupid? Yes, I do think that. I've never been so calm and confident in my life as in that exact moment. I seriously thought he was going to keel over and die right then, right there on our doorstep. But his apoplexy hindered him from any more yelling. There was just steam coming out at that point, so we closed the door on him. After a few minutes, he managed to stagger away and returned not much later with a termination letter, which we accepted with glee and broad smiles, as we informed him we would only need about half the notice period. Since we'd insisted on the standard contract, we also got our deposit back intact. He couldn't point out one new single thing out of order when we moved. We documented everything with pictures as we moved in and had the local Consumer Dispute Council firmly at our backs. And our last story. So you think you can park here because you know the owner? Think again. I currently work at a school as a trainee teacher. Our school has 2 yards, one in the middle of the buildings and one in the front. The one in the front has some grass and benches, and the oldest classes can use it as their schoolyard during breaks, while the younger stay on the inside yard. The outside yard is next to the driveway of the school, where firefighters or ambulances drive through to get to the entrance. One teacher's always present in each yard during breaks in case someone gets hurt or anything. That day, this teacher present in the outside yard was me. Also necessary side note, public school buildings and the property thereon are all owned by the country here. There's no public school on private property, and there are very few private schools here, and they have big signs telling you that they're a private school. The break had almost ended when a really fancy car pulls up and parks right in the driveway, despite 5 signs telling you that it's forbidden to park there. Think something like a Porsche or Jaguar. Not quite sure which exact type of car it was. I go over to inform the driver that he can't even let his car stand there while he's sitting in it. He needs to move it ASAP. The driver gets out of the car, mid-30s probably, wearing an expensive suit, looks really annoyed. I explain everything and he just laughs at me and says, "What do you know? You're a schoolgirl. I know the owner of the property. He said I could park here." Now, I am quite young, but still about 10 years older than the pupils I'm supervising there, so that was weird. But here's the convo. Me. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not a schoolgirl. I'm a teacher here, and I can't imagine, head of our country's name, to have allowed you to park here. It's against the law." Driver. "Are you stupid? I meant the headmaster." He didn't know that the headmaster's office is on the ground floor facing the yard, and he likes to work with his windows open. Me, yelling, "Mr. Headmaster's name?" Headmaster looking out the window. "Yes?" Me. "Did you allow this guy to park here?" The bell rings and the pupils reluctantly go back to their classes. I don't have a class after break, so I'm relaxed. The headmaster, he's a pretty cool guy, just jumps out his window, about 1 meter above the ground, and comes over. Me: he says he knows you and you allowed him to park here. HM: what? That's insane. It's strictly forbidden to park here. Also, I've never seen him before. Driver: okay, that's it. You're not the headmaster here. I'll phone the real headmaster. He'll tell you. While he does that, we stand by looking amused. We hear sirens in the background coming closer and closer. At that point, we didn't know, obviously, but I'll tell you now so that you'll understand everything. Upon entering the chemistry classroom, a pupil ran into his teacher carrying some acids. The acids fell to the floor and soaked both the pupil's and the teacher's shoes, so they called an ambulance for chemical burns. This kind of emergency enables the ambulance drivers to just mow through anything in their way to get to the patients, no concerns for the damage. So the ambulance arrives, the driver sticks his head out the window and screams, "Remove that car!" Driver doesn't move, so his car gets run over by the ambulance. My headmaster calmly calls the police and explains what happened. Right as they arrive, the ambulance comes back, runs over the car yet again, and leaves. Driver was speechless the entire time. Driver needed to pay for the damages on the ambulance, no reimbursement for his car. The pupil and teacher are okay. We teach everyone how to react in this kind of situation, so the other pupils did the right thing, got some gloves on, cut the shoes off the feet, and held them under running water. They both have some scars on their feet, but they very well could have lost their feet if the ambulance had argued with the driver. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.